Hi, fourth graders. Welcome back to your math lessons. We're going to continue chapter 20. Today we will be working on chapter 20, lesson 5. This is coming from page 528 in your textbook. Please get out your textbook, your math journal, and pause the video to get your journal labeled. In today's lesson is going to be another lesson very heavily reliant on vocabulary. It's going to be really important that you have this vocabulary written down for yourself so that you can come back to it later. We have two different ways to classify triangles. Each of these terms is going to be a very important piece for you to remember. In just a moment, I'd like you to pause the video and write down this vocabulary in your math journal. You need to make sure that you identify the difference between classifying triangles by their sides and classifying triangles by their angles. You have 3 terms for each type and pictures to draw. Go ahead and pause the video, get this vocabulary written down, and then unpause and we'll continue to work together. All right, so at this point, you should have written this vocabulary down in your journal. It's very, very important that you have this on hand for yourself. So we're going to be talking about different ways to classify triangles today. Sometimes we classify triangles by their sides. When we classify them by their sides, we have the words equilateral, meaning they have all the same sides. Isosceles, meaning 2 of the sides are the same. And scalene, meaning none of the sides are the same. When we talk about classifying triangles by their angle, we're talking about the angles inside each triangle, and that's how the triangle gets its name. So one classification is called a right triangle. Just like a right angle, a triangle has one right angle inside the triangle. We have an acute triangle, which has 3 angles that all have acute measurements. Remember, the word acute means less than a right angle or less than 90 degrees. Then we also have the term obtuse triangle, which means that it has one angle that is obtuse inside the triangle. And remember, obtuse means more than 90 degrees or more than a right angle. So we're going to get started with those terms and identifying triangles. Now, if you see a triangle has the measurements of the sides on the outside, that means we're going to use one of our side classification terms. If you see the angle measurements on the inside, then that means we're going to use one of our angle classification terms. And sometimes you'll need to make some assumptions to use both, and we'll talk about that when it comes up. So number 1 in our journals, we're going to write down, copy this triangle. It's at a slight slant, and it has one side that's 6 centimeters, 8 centimeters, and 10 centimeters. Number 1 says, how many sides of the triangle are equal? What types of angles does the triangle have? So, how many sides of the triangle are equal? Well, looking at this, none of them are equal. So that's our first part. None are equal. So what that means is we need to now think about what types of angles the triangle has. Well, knowing that none of the sides are equal and looking at the inner angles, I need to decide, does it have right angles, acute angles, obtuse angles, or a mixture? Well, looking at this triangle, I can tell this slanted back angle here is greater than a right angle. A right angle is straight up and down. What we have is slightly slanted back to show that it is an obtuse angle. So we know that we have one obtuse angle, which is this angle down here between the 8 and the 6. So we have one obtuse angle Oops, I misspelled that. Excuse me. Not an angel, an angle. One obtuse angle. And then let's take a look at these angles, the one in between the 8 and the 10 and the 6 and the 10. Do you see how those are really narrow? Are those obtuse, acute, or right? Those are acute. So we have two acute angles. Now, looking back at our vocabulary, when we have a right triangle, that means the other two angles are going to be acute. I'll add that in here. So two acute angles and one right angle. When we have an acute triangle, all three of them are acute. And when we have an obtuse, one is an obtuse angle and the other two are acute angles. A scalene triangle often produces an obtuse triangle. An isosceles triangle often produces also an acute triangle where the insides are all acute angles. Equilateral triangles will not be a right triangle, so those are not commonly found together. But isosceles, most often, those all have acute angles, and scalenes has one obtuse and two acute. So you can come back and write in those little extra notes in that part of your journal if you want that little key reminder. All right, so we're going to move on to classifying each triangle. We're going to write isosceles, scalene, or equilateral, and we're also going to write right triangle, acute, or obtuse. So we have to classify these by both their angle measurements and their sides. So let's take a look at first, number 3, this triangle. I see it has that little blue box in it. That tells us that that is a right angle, which tells us that this is a right triangle. So it's a right triangle. And let's take a look at whether it's isosceles, scalene, or equilateral. Let's look at the sides. So that was looking at the angles. Now we're looking at the sides. I see that we have 3 inches, 5 inches, and 4 inches. All of those sides are different, which means that it is a scalene triangle because no sides are equal. So this is why you want to have those notes in hand, because we're going to be having a lot of vocabulary references today. So this is a right triangle, and it's also a scalene triangle. All right, number 3. Go ahead and draw that also back out the best you can. It's okay if it's not perfect. Just do your very best and we'll get what you mean. So we have 7 feet, 6 feet, and 9 feet are the measurements of this triangle. Now, I don't see that little blue box in here, and I also see that if this was a right triangle, the line would be going about right there. So it's not a right triangle, it's greater, which means it is obtuse. So looking at the inner angles, it's obtuse. Now we need to look at the sides and decide if it's isosceles, scalene, or equilateral. So I see 9, 6, and 7. No sides are equal. So again, we have a scalene triangle. And number 4. Number 4, we have a triangle that has 9 yard measurements all the way around. So looking, let's look first at the angles like we have been. Looking at the inner angles, these all look like acute angles. So this is an acute triangle. All of the angles are less than 90 degrees. Looking at the outsides, I see 9, 9, 9 all the way around. So that means that it is an equilateral triangle. Equilateral means that all sides are equal. All right, we're going to continue going just like that. I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'm going to ask you to do two by yourself. So number 6, let's go ahead and draw that triangle out, get it labeled. We have 10 feet on the top 2 lines and 17 feet on the bottom 2 lines. So let's look at the inside angles first. I see it looks like all of these are acute. This top one looks like it may be a right angle, but looking at it, I can see, let's see here, I'm going to turn this another side. Ooh, that's really hard to tell. Looking at this, I see that the bottom 2 are definitely acute. I'm just questioning this top one. It's kind of hard to tell at that angle. Believe it or not, I'm flipping my my notepad around here to take a closer look at this, and it actually looks like this, if it was a right angle, it looks like that would come right there. That would make it more square. So that top one is obtuse. So that is a tricky one. But since that top one is obtuse, that does make this an obtuse triangle. That one's a little tricky because it's so slight. But it is an obtuse triangle. Looking at the sides, we have 10 feet, 10 feet, and 17 feet. So that makes it not equilateral, but it does have 2 sides that are the same. So is it scalene or isosceles? It is isosceles. Isosceles means that it has 2 sides that are equal and 1 side that is different. All right, so let's continue on. Number 7 and number 8, I would like you to solve on your own. And then pause the video and unpause when you're ready, and I'll give you the answers. Okay, so you should have solved number 7 and 8 on your own. Number 7 has that right angle, that little blue box, which tells us it is a right angle. So that means it's a right triangle. And looking at the sides, we have 12, 13, and 5. None of them are the same, so that makes it scalene. Then number 8, I see all of the inner angles are very small. They're less than a square angle or a right angle, so that makes it acute. Looking at the inner angles and looking at the outsides, we have 3, 3, and 3, which makes it equilateral because all of the sides are the same. All right, so now we are going to move on by looking at just the measurements of a triangle to see whether it is whether it's isosceles, scalene, or equilateral, just by looking at the measurements of its sides. So looking first at number 9, we have the measurements 4 inches, 4 inches, and 4 inches. So I see all of those are the same. That means that this is a what? It's equilateral. Equilateral means equal. Equilateral. I'm not confident that I spelled that correctly. Equilateral. I did. Okay. Number 10. We have 30 centimeters, 40 centimeters, and 50 centimeters. So 30, 40, and 50 are all different. That means it is scalene. And number 11, 3 feet, 7 feet. Excuse me, that was very messy. Let me redo that for you. 7 feet and 7 feet. I see 1 is different, 2 are the same. That makes it not scalene and not equilateral. That makes it isosceles. Please don't judge me if I spelled that wrong. Let me go back and check. I-S-O-S-C. So a C. Okay, I did. Woo, Mrs. Kendall. Spelling words correctly. All right. Okay, number 12, 13, and 14, we're going to measure the sides of the triangle using a centimeter ruler, then classify. Nope, we're actually not going to do that because some of you might not have a ruler at home. So, basically, let's use our best guesstimate to tell whether the sides are the same or not the same. So, one key that you'll see in measuring of triangles, if the sides are the same, you classify it by using tick marks. So, like, let's say you measure the first side, you'll use one tick mark. If the second side you measure is the same, you'll also use one tick mark. But if it's different, it will have two tick marks. And then the third side you measure, if it's the same as the first, it gets one tick mark. If it's the same as the second, it'll get whatever you put for the second. And if it's different than all of those, it'll get three like that. Okay, so we'll use that key as we do these. So number 12, go ahead and do your best to draw a copy of what you saw in your textbook. Now, looking at those, I can pretty confidently say that all of those sides are different. It looks like this side on the left is the shortest. Then moving over to the right is the next shortest. So I'll draw it with two lines. And then the bottom is definitely longer. I'll draw it with all three. So those are all different sides, which means that it is scalene. Number 13. Okay, this looks like a very traditional triangle. I can tell that those lines are all meant to be the same. So I'm going to put one tick mark in each side, showing that they're all the same. If they are all the same, they are isosceles, scalene, or equilateral. They are equilateral. And number 14. Number 14, here we go. All right, now this is hard to tell without a ruler, but looking at this, I believe that the two long sides are the same. They look pretty same in length to me. We'd be able to tell exactly with a ruler. And this base of it looks a different length. So two that are the same, one that is different is not scalene, it's not equilateral, it's isosceles. Isosceles. All right, we're going to use this picture of the alligator with a triangle over it to answer some questions. So number 15, the American crocodile's head appears to be shaped like a triangle. Classify the shape of the snout by the lengths of its sides, right? Isosceles, scalene, or equilateral. Okay, so looking at this triangle, I'm going to go ahead and draw a copy in my notebook. I'd like you to draw one too. It looks like the top of the head where the eyes are is a little bit shorter than the length to its snout. So I'm going to put one tick mark there and two on the other sides. Those are equal from the eyes to the snout are equal in length. So if two of the sides are equal and one is different, that means that we have a isosceles triangle because two are the same and one is different. Number 16. Draw two equilateral triangles that share a side. What polygon is formed? Is it a regular polygon? Okay, this is a bit of review. So it says draw two equilateral triangles that share a side. Okay, so equilateral triangles mean all of the sides are the same length. So we need to draw an equilateral triangle there and another one that shares its side. So I'm going to flip it over like this and draw that there. Okay, so two equilateral triangles that share a side. I see that there is a polygon that is formed. What polygon is that if I just drew around the outsides of it? It has four sides. So what is it called? A four-sided polygon is a quadrilateral. Quadrilateral. And is it regular or is it a regular polygon? Yes, it is. It has all four sides are straight. It's a closed figure and the sides are equal in length. So it is a regular polygon. All right, so thinking about number 17, last one, and then we'll get you started on your independent practice. Explain how a triangle can be isosceles and obtuse. So let's look back to our notes and let's take a look at isosceles and obtuse triangles right next to each other. So we have an isosceles triangle has two sides that are equal, and an obtuse triangle has one angle measurement that is greater than 90 degrees. So let's think about this. I'm going to draw on this part of my notes page for you. So if I have an isosceles triangle, it needs to have two sides that are equal, and one of those angles needs to be obtuse. So if I draw, I think we had an example of that in one of our lessons. Oh yes, number 6 was like that. Do you see how the top two were the same length and the bottom was longer? Well, having that be a lot longer than the two sides will make that angle there where they meet, it will make it obtuse. So let's try that on number 17. I got to draw a little off on the side. Draw your base of your triangle really long, and then draw the other two shorter. Ooh, that was a little bit rough, Mrs. Kendall. Let me see here. Now it's hard. I almost end up trying to make a right triangle, but this is not a right triangle. It's a little bit off. So when that third side is longer, it can make the opposite angle be a larger angle. So an isosceles triangle just has to have two sides that are equal measurement. So that can be our explanation. Isosceles needs two sides equal, and that will actually make both of the inner angles equal. So that, which means two angles are equal. And it's possible for those angles to be small enough so that the other third angle can be larger. So a triangle actually has, inside it has 180 degrees that all three angles can measure. So if we make the two angles small enough, then the third one can be large enough to be greater than 90 degrees. So that can be part of our explanation as well. We're not going to get into that too much into 4th grade. That's more of a really like a 6th grade subject. So don't worry about too much about that now. So, all right, we have your math assignment now that we're going to talk about. You guys have done such a good job working with me today. Thank you for your hard work. Your assignment now is going to be 20.5 PW. You're going to solve all of the problems. And when I'm done talking, I want you to pause the video so that you can have your answer key pulled up here. Please don't look at that and just fill out your work. Actually practice so that you're testing yourself, because at the end of this week, you will have a test to take online and you'll need to have this knowledge in your head. So practice makes perfect. So please make sure you complete your assignment. And then use the answer key to check your work when you're done. All right, you guys, I will see you tomorrow. We're going to continue chapter 20. We have 2 more lessons and then a day of review, and we'll end the week with a test. Thanks so much for your hard work. I'll see you soon.